Welcome to Getting Unstuck with Meredith Moore. I'm a leadership coach and communications expert and author of Getting Unstuck, a guide to moving your career forward. I'm here to help you overcome mental burnout and imposter syndrome so you can have a positive impact at work. In each episode, I shine a spotlight on the mentors, advice, and proven strategies to teach you how to build your brand based on your unique qualities and strengths. So tune in as I share the lessons learned from making an impact inside and outside of corporate America. Welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited. We did a special episode last week in reaction to everything going on in the world. And this week we are getting back on schedule. And I'm so excited because we're joined by Olu Burrell, executive coach, leadership coach, people strategy consultant, copywriter, fellow HU Bison. I could go on and on. So if you're feeling burned out and overwhelmed, if you're wondering how you can still have an impact, if you're considering what is next for you and what you have the capacity to do in these uncertain times, then this episode is for you. We are going to talk about the importance of finding the right coach and the right program for you and your unique goals. So, before we get started and before I even get to the amazing conversation that you're going to get to listen into today about honestly how I got started and found my purpose, not only in the world, but in this business. And you're going to get to meet one of the incredible coaches that we have at Leverette Weekes. That's a question I get all the time is like, who is this? Is it just Meredith? So before I even turn the mic over to Olu, I have to tell you what you are getting ready to be blessed by, because I love that, it might take me a minute to do it, but it took me 99 years to learn it. And Olu is a great example of that. He has more than 15 years of experience working with individuals and teams in multiple arenas, including government, not-for-profit, the private sector, as well as on the secondary and higher education levels. And we're going to talk about the incredible work he did with our client, Teach for America, here in the Twin Cities. But as an HR organization development expert, in the lead human resources agency in the nation's capital, Olu provides training and workplace coaching for management and agency executives across the district. Incredibly relevant right now. In addition to this work, he also manages the Executive Leadership Program, a partnership with George Washington University's Center for Excellence in Public Leadership, a cohort-based program that prepares agency executives for cabinet-level posts. Listen, if you are trying to be a leader in this time, I don't know a better person for you to talk about. And if you are still looking at educational goals, you are talking to somebody who has multiple certifications, and we're going to get into that today too. So with that, I want to thank you, Olu, for taking the time and welcome you to Getting Unstuck. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. Always looking for opportunities to share and to spend time and engage. So hopefully we haven't set the bar so high with my bio that I don't meet expectations.
You can't set it too high.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
Well, welcome. Welcome. We always like to start with a story about how we personally got stuck. And before I turn it over to you to tell us about a time that you got stuck and how you got unstuck, I just feel like I have to share with the audience our experience and your role in my own story of getting unstuck that isn't drawn out even in the book, but really was a huge catalyst. But I know that I'm missing details. So, will you help me out here?
Absolutely. So I know, I remember we were attending a mutual friend's wedding, June of 2016, June 18th. I'm always.
You have a great memory.
I remember. Yeah, just when it comes to certain things, I don't want people to think I remember every single thing, but I do well in that arena. So we were in Richmond for a mutual friend's wedding, and I remember I was walking around to go get breakfast, and I ran into you in front of a diner just a few blocks randomly from the hotel, and I remember just sitting down, and we were just having conversations. We were catching up because we hadn't seen each other in years, and I just started talking to you about the coaching journey I was on. I think right at that time I was finishing up my coach certification training. I would have been finished in the fall of that year, and I was just kind of sharing what I wanted to do, what I was currently doing, and what that path looked like for me. And we just had an amazing conversation at that point. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Can I say, I remember and will never forget, you were working at, was it Banneker?
Well, no, at the time I was working at Employment Services, but I had previously worked at Banneker, which is my high school alma mater. Yeah.
Yes, and you had the example of that you had told the kids there were no slaves. That's not a thing. You cannot be a slave. There were Africans who were enslaved, but they were doctors, they were scientists. And I remember, Olu, I will never forget. I can't even remember how old we were at the time. But I mean, that was like 10 years out of school, right? What was that? That to me, you know, the context of my life is that I grew up in Minnesota. At whatever age that was, too old, that was mind-blowing to me. And that gave me such freedom to think of myself differently, which is a key thing in the book, right? Breaking that concept of I can only do what I've seen. And when you said that, it was like, holy I can do whatever I want to do. Are you kidding me? Like, it was freedom. And then from there, I think the other piece was, you know, the concept of, to that point of freedom, I had only thought of white men and white women as coaches, as people who had the financial flexibility to invest in the careers of others. That was my context. And so then when you said, I'm working full-time and I'm getting this certification because I want to help people who look like us, it was like, oh my God, well, I could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to your point, I mean, language is so incredibly powerful. And so, like, even to the point going back to slave versus being enslaved, like, it's so much power in the words that we use. And most times we're so unaware as to the words that we use to reinforce our own beliefs and assumptions, which may or may not serve us at least from where we're trying to go towards our purpose. So, and to your point, I had only known 2 Black coaches, you know, that I knew were coaches and doing things outside of the, you know, the hey, I'm a life coach type thing. But I'm talking about like people who were moving along in the executive space, which is where I wanted to go. And even when I decided that I was going to go and do it, I heard from a lot of people like, are you sure you want to do that? I mean, do people typically hire coaches that look like you? I mean, you're relatively young for the age group that coaches typically occupy.
Right.
And you don't look like, you know, any coach that I've been exposed to. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of why we need it. You know, that's kind of why we need that. So, yeah.
That's a whole thing, you know, and then that was, I think at that time I was maybe still I can't remember where I was working at the time that we had the conversation, but I remember then my employer assigned me to a coach when I was coming in as an executive responsible for diversity initiatives across the organization globally. And it was a white woman coach who was older, the typical who I had in mind. I didn't even have a choice over, do you want, you know, Becky or Lucy? It was just like, here you go, you get this one. And so that was my first formal executive coaching experience. And her advice, well, it made perfect sense looking back, what she was saying from her perspective of what works here, existing, right? But my role when it was positioned was visionary, different, change agent. And I felt like the coach they gave me wasn't coaching me to grow. She was coaching me to like pull back, like, don't lead with that you're a Black woman. And when I heard that advice in the workplace, it was like, well, first of all, that's not legal. Let me take a sip for that one, right? So if you have a coach, right, who tells you advice like that, that's another reason to call Leverette Weekes, because and so I remember vividly, I went through this experience. I tried to be present, all this. I never really built trust. So I never really explained what was happening for me, you know, which is my fault. But at the same time, as we get into the conversation about what to look for in a coach, you should look for somebody that you're going to be able to trust.
If you do not have what is called psychological safety. In any relationship, you want to have trust. But when it comes to a coaching relationship, in which you want to be able to say, I'm bringing my full self to bear in this conversation so that you can help shepherd me through the path that I'm trying to go on. And if I feel like I can't be that full person with you, what's the likelihood that I'm going to be able to do that in the workplace?
Amen, somebody.
So, I mean,
well, right. How are you going to coach me on a path I'm scared to tell you about?
That's a word right there. Make sure you tweet that. That makes that a quotable, so we can tweet that out. Because that's what it is, right? That fear of what might you think of me, and how might that impact where it is that I'm trying to go, and how is that serving me? Like, those are 3 questions in a row, but the answers to those 3 questions are the most important thing that you can even come up with. Relative to where it is you're trying to go. And
It's a word to the point, Olu. When I think about, from my own experience in leaving corporate America, I went through that coaching experience. I felt so conflicted. It was really a time of I think what I've learned is that for a lot of people, they don't have that experience of deciding red or blue pill early in their career. And for me, I remember when I faced that point, I called you because I was like, listen, somebody remind me again.
But that's the point there as well, right? Because if I'm gonna get deep just for a second, and I'll come right back, I promise. But we oftentimes find ourselves at a crossroads, and at the 2 crossroads, there's safety, i.e., playing it safe, and there's purpose, i.e., moving towards your purpose. And what people don't understand and don't realize is that when you're at that crossroads, you would be well served to have someone who is alongside you, who is going to encourage you to take the purpose path.
Yes.
Because playing it safe will never lead you to your purpose. It just won't. And so if you are being encouraged to tuck your head down, don't say anything, don't rock the boat, and I'm not saying that there isn't wisdom in that advice. Mm-hmm. However, if that advice is coming at the expense of you feeling empowered to own your own career and own your own life, you are not being served. And I can say that quite assuredly. So please just be aware of that.
That's a key. I mean, I feel like this flows right into the conversation, because for me, that, I feel like psychological safety is probably the number one client learning that I have to do on the business development side, is to explain that, yes, we have more processes and procedures around contracts. I want to make sure that the client, the person we're actually working with, understands what is the reporting relationship you're asking our coaches to have with the company. If you're asking me to report out what this person's goals are, I want to make sure they understand that, and that they understand they can opt out of this experience, right? And I feel like for me, that was so real and grounded as being the only in the workplace. And that reality about psychological safety, when you talk about, we did an anonymous survey. Well, if you ask me if I'm Black, if you ask people race and gender, then it's not anonymous for me.
It's not. And if you are having conversations with someone who says that this is supposed to be this, and yet these identifying factors that I am required to respond to, I feel kind of leaves me out there on an island, then you don't have psychological safety. And I can guarantee you one of 2 things. That person's either going to leave, or they will never rise to the occasion, and they will never rise to the person they could be if they felt safe, if they felt like they were included and that they were belonged and supported, and they had access, and they could, that agency, professional bonds. So that's real. That's the long and short of it. Yeah.
Especially now. I mean, we kind of skipped over, but I heard the sirens. I mean, you're based in Washington, D.C., which, is in the midst of, first of all, is one of the heights of leadership, period, in any time in our history. You know, that's when people try to say Howard University isn't the greatest. I'm like, I'm sorry, is your HBCU in DC? Are you on the hilltop though? Are you on the hilltop? Thank you.
I'm just stretching.
Oh, whew.
I'll take back my apology. I didn't mean to apologize.
I mean, so already you have leadership. Already you have a concentration of African Americans in leadership. And then you have lived under this administration for 4 years, which is amazing to me. And now we sit here the week of the inauguration of the first African American Indian vice president woman, and a nationwide alert that white supremacists, which we're very familiar with now in Minneapolis after having curfew and having our city burned in the midst of George Floyd, are now across in 50 cities across the US, getting ready to do who knows what. This is the context of leaders though right now. And so I want to ask you, just from your perspective, sitting in DC, what's really good? Like what?
I mean, it's everything that you just said. You know, it's we are really in a crucible, right? This is where it is. We're in a smelting pot, right? Like we have to decide whether this heat is going to purify us or if it's going to burn us up. Like this, I mean, and I'm just to kind of use an analogy, but yeah, being based in DC, being a lifelong Washingtonian and fifth generation, I might add. We're used to the constant change of leadership as it relates. And so there's a quote that I heard a couple of months ago I've been quoting ever since. It says, constant change is here to stay. I mean, that's just, how do we move into a space of adaptation? What does that look like? Yeah. And so I have been with the understanding, being a Black man in this space where there are not many people who look like us, and leadership development, and also being here in the focal point of the country in Washington, D.C., with history pressing towards us, history both acknowledged and history that has been unacknowledged for so long that people of color are all too familiar with regards to supremacy and the like. I am understanding that we are at a pressure point where we have to decide, and I'm just going to bring back the analogy of the crossroads about what does it look like for us to move forward, and what might we need to reckon with, right? And I'm reminded, and I'm saying this because I literally just taught this in a direct instruction that I did with the federal government and one of the agencies, Marshall Goldsmith's Wheel of Change, when he talks about the 4 things that we have to deal with. What do we want to create? What do we need to eliminate? What do we want to preserve? And what we want to accept, right? And so we have to ask ourselves as a society, what do we want to create that wasn't working before, that didn't exist before, that we now need to add? What do we need to eliminate that's not serving us individually, as a group, as a team, as people who are trying to just do better? What do we need to eliminate? What do we want to preserve that did work well, that will help us as we move forward? And then what do we need to accept, which are things that we cannot affect. And we just have to build the capacity to figure out what that looks like for us. And so I think about that, and I'm recognizing not only do we have historical moments, but this is a real life case study that we are living in. And that future generations will read some of this stuff and say, well, they could have done this better. Mm-hmm. They could have done that better. They might have considered this. What was the diversity of thought around this perspectives, the gift of multiple perspectives, and what does that look like? And so I don't sit here with answers. I sit here with all the questions as coaches we are wont to have. And I think those are things that we need to understand and consider as we think about moving forward and what that looks like for us. So,
I mean, I think you bring up though, this is the challenge for the person listening who's responsible right now for advocating for diversity, for advocating for inclusion, for advocating for themselves. If they are different, to your point, not only are you now dealing with psychological safety, not only am I dealing with imposter syndrome, right? Not only am I dealing with the reality of having exponential change now, more change in our lifetimes than any generation previously, right? This is no longer an exception. This is becoming the rule. You know, in a country that sat at a place that said never here, we're now here, to the point of lockdowns, to the point of having police go through we're here now. So people, to your point, are having to just manage change, distance learning, right? All of these things. And I got to go to work.
On top of all that.
On top of all that, I got to go to work. And so I just think it's so interesting, you know, your advice around, so in that context of, you know, overwhelm, burnout, work expectations haven't gone down. I work 3 jobs. I mean, this is insane, right? Like, what should people be doing now that can help them to feel empowered in all of this?
Yeah. I'm really glad you asked that question because, and you laid it out beautifully. Like, we are dealing with all these things, right, that feel, and I don't want to gloss over this point, that feel to specifically to Black people and people of color in this country, intensely personal, intensely close. There's proximity there, and I'm going to use this word because I can't think of another one in this moment. And if it's not the appropriate word, then it's just what I have access to right now. We don't have the luxury of separating our lived experience, right, and the experience that we watch with the work that we do every day. Even if we weren't all remote because of a global pandemic, we wouldn't have that luxury. And so now we are dealing with the loss of, you know, I remember this little thing you might have heard of before that was all the rage prior to March of 2020. It was this little thing called work-life balance, right?
Amen.
little thing called work-life balance. And now we find that our homes have become our offices. They have become hospitals for sick and loved ones. They have become our staycation sites because we can't go anywhere. Well, those who are, you know, trying to be as, you know, as that try to be as responsible as possible, right? They've also been places where we've just they've been places of worship for those of us who are subscribed to religion. And so it's taken on all of this. And we're also supposed to attend work and be present and be intentional and do all this stuff while we're holding all these things. And they've been, sorry, I can't omit the last one. They've been schoolhouses for those of us who have young children who have to. So we have all these things that we're holding, and we're holding the threat of a pandemic, and we're holding this social and racial unrest, and we're expected to show up for work, and where we may not feel as supported or recognized in those spaces, right? And so I just wanted to lay that out because I think the very best way for us to move forward with regards to that, and I borrow this from Alan Deutschman's Change or Die, and he talks about how a lot of people think that change happens through the 3 F's, which are known as facts, fear, and force, right? If I give you enough facts, you'll change. If I give you fear, if I instill fear in you, you'll change. Or if I force you, you'll change. We've seen a lot of that across the headlines over the last X amount of years, right? But while those have been proven to yield some change, it's not lasting. And so what he talks about is what helps he borrows from behavioral science when it comes to the 3 R's, and that's relating. The first R is relating. And relating is finding your tribe, not just the people you want to work with, but also the people you want to work alongside you, like, I don't know, a coach, or a company like Leverette Weekes, shameless plug. So you want to work alongside you, say, how do we get together as a team and say we are coming together to be supportive of one another. It's a give and take. We have the space in the agency to be both sage and of service in those same spaces. And you can do that on a professional level and on a personal level, right? Because I want to borrow from the incredible um, sage Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun. One of my favorite quotes by her is, "That which makes you exceptional, if you are at all, is that which must inevitably make you lonely."
Mm.
Um, and so when you find yourself as either exceptional or the exception, it is extremely likely that you will also feel alone or, in
Yeah.
fact, lonely. And so finding that tribe, and find those people you want to move forward with is really important. The second R is to repeat. So once you come together, you have to continuously go back. It's like you return to the well to get filled. Because we pour every day. We're pouring
Yeah.
out, we're pouring out. But to get refilled, we have to go back to those people, traditionally those people who we know, like, and trust,
Mhm.
or who are providing a service to us that help us feel and increase our capacity. And the last R is to reframe. So after we relate, we come together, we repeat, we come over and over again, we build in that space, we do it with intention. Now we're able to look at the world through a new lens,
Mhm.
a lens that includes those people who are helping us out of those good intentions, because they want to see us win, they want to see us succeed, and they can say, you know what, this problem that we had when we first got together, it's not a problem anymore, it's an opportunity.
Mhm.
So if you feel like you don't have a voice, maybe now's the time that you feel that psychological safety in that group to
Yeah.
say, we're going to help you devise a plan to approach your leadership in ways that you can best help your organization to move forward towards what would make a pleasant space and experience for all who work there and for all who are there. And so, what does that look like? And so, that would be
Yes.
what I would rely on: the three R's: relate, repeat, and refrain.
I mean, I want to tell you that when you started and you were talking about, being able to just relate.
Yeah,
I was thinking that so much is the issue, is that in the context of all these things, we didn't even say in that COVID, you've survived that during this time. Like Black
uh,
Lives Matter being asked,
yeah,
did we make a statement? Can I talk to you now about what it's like to being Black? All of
yeah,
these things now, right, that people have had to deal with, on top of, I would say the number one, if I was going to boil down all of our coaching clients,
yeah,
right, it comes down to a very simple thing of the definition of professional. And that the context of professional, I experienced this
yeah.
myself in starting this business that my dad had started. And his definition of professional means you have stripped the culture out of it. It's
Mm,
professional. And when I could articulate that to him, to your point about words matter, I mean, you want to talk about a reckoning. That was a real, because my daddy, he ain't stripped no culture
yeah.
out of nothing. I'm like, yeah,
No, he didn't. He is
right,
himself. He is himself wherever he goes.
wherever he go.
Wherever he goes.
Wherever he go. So I'm like, so I don't understand. So then you're to your point. So now you're holding yourself to a bar you can never achieve. It was never realistic.
No,
But if
no.
you're surrounding yourself with people who do not have the same cultural context, you can bring yourself to believe you are not just the exception, you're the problem.
That part. That's the part. But that's the part. Because because exactly, and that's why I used both the word exception and exceptional, because those have different contexts
They
and
do.
connotations as well. And to your point, yeah, you can see yourself. I am alone in this space, or
Yes.
I am not. And even if someone doesn't have the cultural context, at least if you have people who have a cultural sensitivity, right?
Yes.
People who will sit in curiosity and empathy, even if they don't have the answers. And that's what true allyship looks like. If you find yourself in spaces where you can't find someone
Yeah.
who at least physically, or racially or relationally, have the same or similar context, if you can find someone
Yeah.
who has um, intellectual humility, right, and someone who says, "Let me embrace you as a person first, and say, you know what, while our differences are stark, that does not mean that because they are stark, we cannot be in alignment. That does not mean that we cannot be in concert with one another. We can't relate. And so, what does that look like to create that? But yeah, back to your point about what you were saying, that the way in which we see the word professional, and our orientation to that word and how we show up, is going to be a huge determiner as to the way in which we see our power in our power as an individual, our agency as an individual when we show up in those spaces. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it's also a word that, especially in the context of people in your own limited, I mean, I talk all the time about, I've had a therapist for 20 years now. You know, I've been blessed to have the same therapist for probably 12. I mean,
Wow.
we've been together for a long, matter of fact, longer than that. I got her, I think, my second week working at McDonald's, because I was like, I know I'm gonna need help. I mean, I'm a vegan working in the largest fast food restaurant in the world. I was like, I need somebody to talk to me about how I'm gonna do this, right?
There you
But
go.
people
Yeah.
with whatever mental capacity you have,
Yeah.
doing their best to do jobs that we know were reshaped
Yeah.
5, 10 years ago to be 3, 2, 4-person jobs that now one person is doing. And this word professional is weaponized
Yeah.
when you react to the context under which you're working.
Yeah.
And so, in addition to, I love what you said about, we have coaches of all colors that work with us. Emily is a wonderful, I always like to introduce her as my white woman coach, because people are always so excited to ask me, do you have Black women coaches? Do you have Black men coaches? Well, okay, let's normalize she's a white woman coach then. So she's a white woman coach and a mental health therapist.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk about when we work together is that she has to not only be able to empathize and understand my experience, she has to be willing to use her privilege to advocate for what she knows about my experience and what I'm telling her I need, not what she thinks I need based on her lens of experience.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful to that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the questions I think that people ask is like, well, is this an all Black? That was never the intent for myself or for my dad. I mean, when you think about Howard, I remember how many times I'd be like, there's white people. I don't know how many classes I had that were all Black looking back.
Yeah. Yeah. Not many.
Not many. So this thought process. And then I was going to say too, Olu, and the added context for everybody listening who is an alum of Howard University, who has any potential affiliation with Kamala Harris, and has had to have that on top of everything else right now. If you're looking for a job, if you're trying to get promoted, if you're doing anything, which leads you into a political conversation.
Yeah.
At work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is not for anybody listening.
No.
I think sometimes there's a perception that coaching is punitive. I need a coach because something happened. I need a coach because there's something, you know what I mean? This is the time, if you're listening, if there is any opening for you to prioritize investing in yourself, in getting corporate resources that are going to help you navigate this, man, this is the time to introduce the program, to introduce whatever it is to get you some help at work, man. So I want to tee you up, Olu, because you do such incredible work. And I know in this time, you've gone on to get some certifications that are incredibly relevant. So just tell us a little bit about when people think about advocating to bring in somebody like you, what is it that you bring to that opportunity? What certifications and programming do you do?
So I guess the basis of the context. So I have a master's in organization development, which is which is about the people side of business, understanding in context how you help teams work, how you help the organization work within the context of its system, and all the interpersonal things that are aligned with that. And so then I became a coach on top of that, so I would be able to not only work with the entire organization, but also work one-on-one with individuals. And so I am a International Coach Federation certified, professional certified coach, also known as PCC. There are 3 levels: ACC, PCC, and MCC. So I'm at the PCC level, which I do want to say as an aside, but it might become the focal point. But from the research that I've done, and I'm not going to tell my exact age, but I'm between 40 and 49. There are less than 20 Black men who have my coaching certification worldwide.
Say that again. Pause for the cause. Say it again. Say it again.
There are less than 20 Black men worldwide, not U.S. based, but worldwide, who are between the ages of 40 and 49. I'm just saying that there are more outside those parameters. Of course, the other as you get older, there are a lot more, but who are certified at the PCC level through the International Coach Federation. And so I'm grateful to be among that number. And I also recognize, again, that which makes you exceptional, if you are at all, must inevitably make you lonely. And I also want to say, I know two of those gentlemen. I know them, and they're all in this area. So it's like I know 20% of that population, basically, when it comes down to it. And so I'm certified in the Leadership Circle Profile 360, which is a 360 instrument by the Full Circle organization. And so I do 360s through that lens. I also am certified through another certification called ESKI, which is the Emotional Social Competency Inventory through Korn Ferry, which is an offshoot of Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence. It measures emotional intelligence capacity. I am also certified in Myers-Briggs type indicator, and I'm an ENFP for those who might be curious. And I have queued up a couple of other certifications I'm getting through confidence coaching certification that I'm going to get. And then I also have one I'm doing at the end of March, which is probably about two months from the recording for IDI, which is Intercultural Development Inventory, which measures the effectiveness of diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives that organizations are moving to. And I know that, I want to acknowledge a couple of things. So one, as I'm saying this out loud, one voice in my head is saying, this feels very self-serving, Olu. You know, only because, I'm acknowledging that's not the only voice, but I just want to acknowledge that.
I'm fascinated at this.
Because it's like, oh, you're saying all these things. And that's because I have been taught growing up that to highlight yourself like that is a selfish act. And so I am consciously unlearning that. And so I just want to give you a window into my thought process for those who are listening or hearing. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just find this so fascinating because one, so often we have clients that are Black women that have that narrative.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I had to face an own gender concept. I'm like, but you're a dude.
and that's also why there's more than one voice in my head at the time as well, because acknowledging what you just said, I have to own my privilege in that space.
Oof, that's tough.
Relative to where you sit.
Yeah.
Right? And so I own that, right? And so, and there are multiple voices, and we talk all the time.
Right.
All the time.
Face them, right? At some point in life, just like, hey, here. Right.
What is it? Mark Twain says, I have conversations all the time, and sometimes other people are involved. Right? So there's another voice that says, there's a difference between modesty and humility.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Modesty is downplaying what you do well, and humility is just not highlighting what it is that you do well, right? Or boasting about it, rather. And so acknowledging that I can share my expertise and be proud of it and still get to claim that I'm humble. Mm-hmm. And also because modesty doesn't really serve you very well in terms of trying to share your expertise. And so for people who look like you and I, or who have similar experiences relative to being a minority in professional spaces, we have to remember, again, language is incredibly powerful.
Yes.
Ask yourself before you say, I don't want to feel like I'm boasting or bragging, saying to yourself, but if I'm good at this, and if my intention is to be world-class at this, then I'm going to have to get comfortable what it is that I know and sharing those things that I'm frankly I'm good at, and that is the struggle. And so I wanted to acknowledge that
Yes.
because I know there are going to be different people who are listen to this, and there might be some people who are like, "Wow, that's impressive," and other people are like, "I'm turned off because talking too much about themselves." And so you acknowledge that,
Yeah.
and then you make a choice to say, "So am I willing to let that keep me from
Mm.
doing that going forward?" And I
Yes.
can tell you what the answer to that is, and that's no. So you got to keep moving. But I just wanted to self coach in the moment out loud.
Well, I want to add to that because, I think that's one of the reasons that I love having you in the coaching practice is because it is a unique voice. It is a unique experience. It represents that we are not a monolithic group. We
We're
have
not.
different experiences, even within African American, there are different experiences, right? But the other thing I thought about is, for me, a lot of what I work with my clients with on are affirmations. Like, how do you institutionalize this? How do you put it into a system, right? And when you were saying that, it brought up for me, that is where I started with this model of how can I help? Because I would be in these spaces where I would really feel like imposter syndrome kicks in, particularly when I was working in STEM, right? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a technical person. And so I would frame up whatever contribution I would make. I'm an introvert, by the way. So I don't like to talk. You know what I mean? So but if I could frame it in the way of one, putting it in the context of we, not me.
Yeah.
So how can I help, right, in this
Yeah.
situation? And then really putting it into what's comfortable for what I find a lot of African Americans, which is service.
Yeah.
Connecting it to, again, like you said, your purpose in that moment and letting that push you through. Yes, there's going to be haters. I have never been anywhere where there is not a hater. Embrace it, love it, tell them hi and bye. Like, let's move on. But if you were in that room and you don't help, my spiritual belief is that at some point there's a reckoning. I'm going to have to explain to somebody of how I sat here. Like you said in the beginning, they're going to look back on 2020. Our kids are going to ask us, what the hell were you doing?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if you don't feel good about that, like if you don't feel like your actions in this time are representative of your values.
Yeah. Yeah. Say that part again. Say
I mean,
that part again.
say that. Hey, as we talk about being from Howard and having people on every side of the line,
Yeah.
you gotta think about your values. There's no judgment in that.
Yeah.
That's a part of the reason with getting unstuck, why I started with, I was in these corporations, Olu, and I was like probably 28. And I had gone through my third exercise of corporate values, and I realized I didn't have none. I was in my car and I was like, and whose fault? That was the voice I heard. And whose fault is that? That you've prioritized everybody else. I got a post-it that I keep over my computer that says, where I do not put my intention, work will fill in. It's a coping mechanism, right? For a lot of people, especially with imposter syndrome, you're just doing a lot of work. But to your point, if you're not advocating for yourself, if you're not thinking about how am I bettering myself in this time? How am I getting a certification? How am I finding where I'm useful? How am I identifying my values? What's your line that you're not going to cross? If you've learned nothing, if that ain't a reason to get a coach, that should be concerning to you.
It should be. And to augment what you're saying, two things. So one, values are incredibly important because values inform how you make difficult decisions. That is the lens by which you need to make decisions, especially the difficult kind. So if you've ever witnessed someone or you've experienced someone do something and you said either to yourself or to others out loud or in your head, I couldn't do that and go to sleep at night, that is indication that their values don't align with yours. And if you are saying that about your workplace, you definitely need a coach.
Yeah.
Before you need some corrections officer. I'm being silly, but seriously, but that misalignment in that will be detrimental to you. And the second thing I want to say about that is also to your point, there is no one who is going to manage your career more personally and more intently than you.
Say that again.
there is no person who is going to manage your career more personally or more intently than you.
Yeah.
You have to take hold of the reins of your career. Just say, well, you know what? If they think I'm good enough for this job, somebody will come to me and say, you know what? You should apply. Nah. or I did a good job this year. I should get that promotion. Nah.
No.
Those two things are passive, right? And
Yeah.
I could go on and on and on. And so if you are trying to navigate your career, you need to be sitting down either with your supervisor or with HR and just say, hey, I want to develop my career plan. I want to move from where I am to whatever that looks like. And you have to figure out what that looks like to navigate, you know? And right now, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. There's a lot of people pulling back on things. And unfortunately, one of the first things that people tend to pull back on is training and development and education and stuff like that. But that's exactly what you need to build that capacity so you can figure out where it is that I want to go. And I'm going to say something. And if you're listening, I want you to put your ear up against your speaker, turn your headphones up, or whatever. Or if you're looking at this on video, I want you to look I'm looking right at you. Let me tell you this. Your purpose is pandemic proof. Okay? Your purpose is pandemic proof. Don't let what is happening in the immediate affect the way that you see and experience the ultimate. You still have a ways to go, and you need to know that you might have to make a pit stop. You might have to go horizontal instead of vertical, at least for a while, so you can get your bearings. It's okay. But that is something that you need to know and understand, because there are a lot of people who are choosing to give up, or may not even choose. They feel like they have no choice but to, or that they have to pack up. You know what? That was a highfalutin idea. Nobody says highfalutin. But that was a
Right.
But that was a lofty goal. No, that's your dream. You know, how do you shift from a dream deferred to a dream preferred? Like we go language, and what do we do? I'm sorry, and I'm a poet too. So if you hear some stuff come out, that's going to happen from time to time. But you just understand that and know that for yourself and believe it, because there's a difference between knowing something and believing it. And I'll leave it at that.
Listen. First of all, for everybody listening, you're welcome. You're welcome. You didn't even know you were going to get all that. I tried to warn him at the beginning to say, this is going to be a blessing to your life. I think this is going to be a teaching. You dropped so many gems in this, but what I'm most excited about and what I have to thank you for is always bringing your full self to every time I see you, whether it's walking down the street in Richmond or zooming in from DC in the midst of all of these things. Just thank you for sharing your story, sharing how you can help, sharing how coaching has helped you to find your purpose. And for that, I got to figure out how to put that into a Monday motivation. That your purpose is pandemic proof might be episode part 2 of this, because you are absolutely right. And so for anybody listening, if you take nothing else away, believe in yourself, bet on yourself. You must participate in your own rescue. Rescue yourself today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow is not promised. This is the time. So I want to thank you, Olu, for joining me today. I want to thank everybody for listening to today's episode of Getting Unstuck with Meredith Moore. Connect with me at gettingunstuckguide.com for more lessons learned from making an impact inside and outside of corporate America as we guide you to understand and practice what makes you happy. Thank you. And remember, again, I'm here to help.